Video 6.3 Franciscus Kolodzey and Maria Erma Pekar. Franciscus Kolodzey and Maria Erma Pekar were born in Slovakia, which was a part of the Empire of Austria-Hungary, which was later divided into other countries after World War I. Franciscus Kolodzey's family lived in the town of Stara Lubovnia, Slovakia, just 20 miles south of Poland and the former Kingdom of Galicia. Maria Erma Pekar was born in the small town of Barbinia, just 30 miles south of where Franciscus was born. Franciscus was born on the 20th of January, 1871. He was baptized in the Roman Catholic Church located in the town square in Stara Lubovnia, a town also known as Old Lublo. At least 2 generations of Kolodzeys lived in Old Lublo before Franciscus was born. Franciscus was baptized on the 2nd of February, 1871. His parents were Joannes Kolodzey and Maria Tokarszky, who were living in Vitus or Old Lublo. They lived in house 338. We know this is the correct baptism because they are the same parents listed on Franciscus's marriage record known as Document A. In Slovakia, baptisms were often planned and carried out by the godparents. His were Andreas Kolodzey, who was likely his uncle, but perhaps his grandfather, and Anamola Sanyi. Maria Erma Pekar was born on the 13th of October, 1872, in the mountain village of Barbinia near the town of Margt u Savche. So very little is known about her family aside from her baptism. It is only because of her marriage record that we even know who her parents were. Maria Erma Pekar was baptized on the 16th of October, 1872. Her parents were Johannes Pekar and Katharina Jabroczki, who lived at Barbinia house number 66. Her godparents' names were Georgius Antal and Katharina Vorgner. Despite having listed his arrival date as the 6th of May, 1892 on his petition for citizenship, both Frank and Irma listed their arrival year as 1891 on the 1900 census. There are several similar arrival records for Franciscus and Irma's name variants arriving between the 5th of May and the 19th of May, 1891. We do not know whether they knew each other in Slovakia, met somewhere on the voyage, or met after they arrived in America. Nonetheless, on the 28th of October, 1893, Franciscus and Irma were wedded at St. Peter's Catholic Church in Newark, New Jersey. Their marriage documents, Documents A and B, serve as critical documents to understand Franciscus and Irma's past, without which their histories might have been complete mysteries. Frank and Irma lived at 56 Prince Street. Frank was a tailor. The documents list Frank's and Irma's parents' names. They were married by Americus Richtarczyk, who had a parish elsewhere, and was witnessed by Charles Dlugolinski and Johann Damix. All three have ties back to Slovakia. Sometime, either before or after their marriage, Franciscus and Irma sought a professional photographer who took some of the only photographs that the family has of the young couple. By the grace of God, the photographs survived the inevitably chaotic aftermath of what was to come in 1905 and 1907. Close examination of the photographs show Irma's dress was perhaps a photography prop or a hand-me-down with a few tears and stitched repairs. On the 30th of July, 1890, their first son Frank Eduard Kolodzey was born. At the time they still lived at 56 Prince Street in Newark. A vintage map of the address shows buildings once stood where a park now stands at the same address. A few months later, Frank was christened at St. Peter's Church where his parents had married. In December of 1895, Franciscus had declared his intentions to become a United States citizen. This process would take almost 5 years to complete. On the 26th of January, 1898, Irma gave birth to their second child, John Jacob Kolodzey. A month later, he too was christened at St. Peter's Church in Newark. By 1900, they were renters at 206 Melvin Avenue in Richmond Borough, Staten Island, New York. We also know from the 1900 census that Franciscus worked as a day laborer, so he probably made very little money. Both Franciscus and Irma could read, write, and speak English. A few weeks after the census interview, Franciscus was a naturalized U.S. citizen. The documents he completed for this process provided a few insights into his past. They showed his date and location of birth, his arrival date in America, and showed his address as Lexington Avenue in Staten Island. It is important to recognize a person vital to Franciscus's successful naturalization, Cornelius Schultz. Whether he voluntarily assisted Franciscus or did it for a fee is unknown. Nevertheless, Cornelius's signature and endorsement appeared several times on Franciscus's documents. After 5 years, on the 25th of July, 1900, Franciscus Kolodzey was officially an American citizen. Fortunately, his naturalization certificate along with associated documents survived into the digital age. On the 1st of July, 1901, their third child, Joseph Frank Kolodzey, was born in Staten Island. Despite his fabricated date of birth on his World War I draft registration to make himself old enough to join his brothers overseas, he was born in 1901. On the 28th of July, 1905 around 12:30 p.m., Franciscus died of endocarditis. His aortic and his mitral valves failed, and his death was contributed to by anasarca edema of the lungs. A few hours later, at 3:30 p.m., Irma gave birth to Charles Stephen Kolodzey, later Kolodzey, where they lived at Mildred Avenue. We do not know which came first, Irma going into labor, or Franciscus's heart attack. At this point, we can only imagine that one caused the other. What a way for young Charles to come into the world. Despite the inevitable chaos Irma must have faced, she managed to ensure that young Charles Stephen Kolodzey was baptized at St. Joseph's Church in Bayonne, New Jersey 2 days after his birth. The pastor for the baptism was Emeritus Richtardzig, the pastor that had married Franciscus and Irma and had baptized Frank and John years before. The sponsors, and perhaps Charles' godparents, were Antony Ronkowitz and Anna Pawlowski. On the 5th of August, 1905, Franciscus Kolodzey was laid to rest in St. Peter's Cemetery Plot 11, Section 4, Range 6. There is no record of attendees for the service, but undoubtedly, Irma and her boys were present. After 2 years of caring for a newborn and 3 young boys, on the 15th of August, 1907 Irma succumbed to typhoid fever, which has only a 10 to 30% mortality rate. But being a widowed mother of 4 boys, she likely was unable to afford treatment, and it is likely that her health had diminished so much after the death of her husband that she lacked the energy to fight the illness. The address listed on her certificate of death was 93, Hall Avenue in Perth Amboy. This address was right next door to John and Victoria Jabrocki, who had later taken Joseph Kolodzey into their home to care for him as shown on the 1915 New Jersey census. It is quite possible that John Jabrocki was related to Irma's mother Catherine Jabrocki. After all, it makes sense that after the death of her husband, that Irma would want to live near family. As a side note, John and Victoria Jabrocki owned a few lots in Perth Amboy, but after John died a few years later in 1911, Victoria sold the lots, likely to help with day-to-day costs of living and perhaps to offset the expenses of raising Joseph Kolodzey. Maria Erma Pekar lies in rest at the Holy Trinity Cemetery in Perth Amboy, New Jersey. For the second time in just 2 years, the boys said goodbye to one of their parents. At the time of Irma's passing, Frank was 13, John was 9, Joseph was 6, and Charles was only 2 years old. The 4 brothers were orphans. Thanks to their own determination and resourcefulness, and to the good people that stepped forward to take care of them, the boys lived long and productive lives. Their families produced many offspring. Despite both dying at a young age, Franciscus and Irma's legacy lives on. This concludes the story of Franciscus Kolodzey and Erma Pekar until further research reveals new information. Please click the like button and subscribe for future updates to this video and other videos in the series.